Let's go. Let's get into this. I am live on IG. Back at y'all one more time. The Bally Kid has returned. This is where we at right now. This is part 3 of my Neo-Populism series. And for me to really kind of paint this picture of why this topic is important to me, and this whole idea of neo-populism and why I centered the concept of this new sort of populism around the issue of the Jews is because of this almost this super majority opinion. When you of course add in, you can factor in, sprinkle in some of our compatriots on the so-called right. You get to see this sort of supermajority coming into being, so to speak. And so I spoke last time. Let me just briefly kind of go into how part 1 and part 2 and sort of give a quick summation before we get into what I came to talk about here today. So if you haven't seen, and what's up, shout out to IG. You're probably going to get the side of my face a lot. I didn't live stream last time. I should have, but I figured I'd do it this time because it kind of adds a little, flavor to the whole thing and what I'm doing. Because, when I feel like I'm in front of an audience, I kind of show out a little bit, which I sort of didn't do last time. So in part 1, right, the majority of part 1's discussion was about outlining the theories of the father of socialist Zionism, a man by the name of Moses Hess. All right. And the reason why I wanted to go into that and to discuss that, because the animosity towards Jews that are coming by way of people on the right is twofold. On the one hand, right, there is this sort of blaming the kind of secularization of Western society on the Jews because of the perceived control that they have over popular culture, right? And I'm talking in the form of entertainment, music, film, and so on and so forth, right? And you also have amongst many of folks on the right is this belief that the political class in America, right, has sort of bypassed what is in the best interest of the citizenry domestically in favor of trying to help expand and bolster the sense or the reality of this kind of American empire sort of project or phenomenon, right? And so, when we have these conflicts and these issues abroad, particularly in the Middle East, a lot of us on the right, this whole America First attitude, this whole America First mantra is really, I think, what is motivating much of this, because a lot of us on the right have began to foster this kind of conspiratorial mindset where we are coming to the belief that our political system has been captured and usurped by those who do not have America's best interest at heart first and foremost. And so again, I'm not suggesting that these are not credible, legitimate, and valid concerns. But once we have that question in our minds, the better question, or what should, I guess, the next step should be from there, is to ask ourselves, what exactly do we do about that, and how do we? Is it an issue, and if it is an issue, to what extent, and what should be done about that? And so I wanted to talk about Moses Hess just to give people an understanding, because oftentimes when you hear Jews or Jewish people brought up, when it comes to a lot of these kind of what I call these, it's funny, because anytime you say the sorts of things that I say, because I myself have been called a neocon a few times. This is the first time I've ever been called a neocon for my opinion, for my stance on the issue. But you have a ton of Johnny come latelys to the realm of politics and history, who ironically are referring to a lot of old guard, even a lot of conservative intellectuals, as neocons. I'll give you an example. I have said on many different platforms, and I've said this a couple of times, in my opinion, I said that Dr. Victor Davis Hanson and Dr. Thomas Sowell are America's two greatest living conservative intellectuals. And someone in the comment section, I forgot where I made this statement. Somebody in the comment section said of Victor Davis Hanson that he is a neocon. This is, so again, I mean, this person, it's not to say that a person is incapable of being wrong, no matter their stature, right? I'm not suggesting that. But I think that a little, humility should come to bear here when you start to talk about someone who is as accredited as Dr. Victor Davis Hanson. But of course, because you're on the internet and you're free to say what you want to say, right? And all of a sudden, you have the authority, right, and the gall and the stones to ride down someone like Victor Davis Hanson, or even Dr. Thomas Sowell, who has an opinion on the quote unquote Jewish question. And so am I to believe Victor Davis Hanson or Dr. Thomas Sowell, or am I to believe you? And so oftentimes what you hear is there is this implication that there is something inherent within either the Jewish culture or the Jewish faith that sort of leads them into this kind of secularism that we saw in the 19th century give birth to the I won't say it gave birth to the communist movement, because communism as a philosophy was a thing even before the publication of the Communist Manifesto, as I myself have outlined. But we sort of see this kind of international a Marxist movement as specifically or uniquely and exclusively, we see it as a Jewish thing or a Jewish phenomenon. And so we need to, again, ask ourselves, how, in fact, does the tenets of Marxism align with the Hebrew faith? And so that's what I kind of went into part one a tad, and to show that Marxism is not just the enemy of the Christian world. Marxism is the enemy of not just all freedom-loving peoples, but religious peoples of various stripes, and Jews too are included in that, because the left has no respect for the Jewish faith either. Even those on the left who are Jew, or who may be Jewish by ethnicity, but have no affinity for the religion. Now, I explained even Marxism's implication for all religions. I just talked about that, the betrayal of Hebrew customs and Hebrew traditions. Talked about the racial bigotry inherent in leftism, because Karl Marx was a radical, as we use the term anti-Semite today. The word anti-Semite did not become popular within the political lexicon until around about the 1880s, thanks to the German political activist, a man by the name of Wilhelm Marr. Maybe we'll get into him later, but yeah. So it's funny that you have that, because again, when you look at Karl Marx, we say, well, Karl Marx was an ethnic Jew. Yes, Karl Marx was an ethnic Jew, but because of the suppressions that were placed upon the Jewish people by the Prussian government, many of Jews there, as a means of survival, or perhaps many of Jews at the time, and I think this is especially true of Karl Marx's father, kind of opened himself up to the ideas of the Enlightenment, particularly at the point when France liberated the Jews from Prussian tyranny. And of course, I've even talked about that in part one. and where when once Napoleon and his forces were removed from Central Europe, restrictions on Jews were then reimposed, and many of Jews, as a means of survival, distanced themselves from the faith or just outright converted to Christianity. But again, the strange thing is when we talk about Marx, we don't mention the fact that Marx was an ethnic Jew. He became a devout Christian, and then he eventually became an atheist, and then he became a communist. But we don't talk, we miss that part in between. Why? How is it that we neglect we neglect to mention that at a point in Karl Marx's life, he was in fact a Christian? We only remember him for being a Jew because of the twofold nature of Judaism. Judaism, at least in the eyes of the sort of critics of Jewish people, are not allowed to distance themselves or denounce their heretics. Christians seem to have that luxury. If someone is spouting off this kind of liberation theology rhetoric, or they traffic in the social gospel, fellow Christians would accuse that person of not really being a Christian. But when someone like Karl Marx and Moses Hess are proponents of socialism as their God, the state as their God, one that does not involve the worship of Jehovah, which was Moses Hess's words, or at least his sentiment in many respects, that person still belongs to the Jews, even though there is nothing Jewish about their orientation. Again, many of Jews bought into the ideas of liberalism and the idea of assimilating into the wider culture on the basis of a lot of these popular Enlightenment ideas that began taking Europe by storm in the 18th century, which is again a lot of that stuff I talked about in part one. Part two, let me say this. I like this quote. I like this quote here. This is a quote by Rabbi Yossi Goldman. He says that in Poland, they hated the Jews because they were poor. In Germany, they hated the Jews because they were rich. In Russia, they hated the Jews because they were bourgeois capitalists. And in America, they hated the Jews because they were communists. In Europe, they say move back to Palestine, but in Palestine, they say move back to Europe, okay? And so this is true. No matter what you go, no matter what you do, Jews are hated for being poor. Again, I covered this in part two when I was quoting from some of the early, German intellectuals, the neo-Hegelian Marxist intellectuals that helped to lay the groundwork for what would become the Nazi ideology, and why they began to cultivate this hatred for Jews, right? And so again, they kind of blamed Jews for the state of economic affairs in the Weimar Empire or Republic. I'm sorry, but again, this was even prior to the Weimar Republic. This was during even the times of Otto von Bismarck, the great unifier of Germany. So there were these attitudes, and so again, when even in the United States, when you had this notion that the fear of communism was largely overblown, those who were trying to warn America of this threat, this nefarious threat, oftentimes they were accused of being anti-Semites, because a lot of the proponents of this of communism, of Marxism in the United States were in fact ethnic Jews from parts of Central and Eastern Europe. And again, it's sort of, so why was this so? Why was this the case, right? You have to understand that there are a multitude. I know I'm getting ready to sound like a liberal or even like a leftist when they talk about this whole concept of intersectionality, right? One can be Jewish by race, for example, and German by culture. And so when you look at the previous discussion that I had, and I'm laying all this out because I felt the need to do so, because it does get a little bit complicated, and I want the listeners, the viewers of my channel, and on my Instagram page to really kind of think and you know, start to really ask themselves some difficult questions and really start to to do the work. Y'all seen I Am Racist? The Do the Work workshop. Oh man, if y'all ever seen Am I a Racist, man, y'all need to go check that out today. That junk was hilarious. Anyway, yeah, so that's why I felt the need to kind of lay all of this out. Because again, there is, and this is why I called the previous upload The Rise of the German Mind, right? And so when you look at the proportion of Jews with respect to the wider population, it is asymmetrical to their public profile. And so it's easy for Jews to be sort of blamed for all things wrong because they tend to excel in all things that they do. Again, this is not me trying to kiss anybody's ass, because if I was so hung up on it and was so, you know, then why in the world, you know, why won't I go the Shine route? You know, the rapper Shine. I ain't gonna talk about Puff Daddy, y'all, but anyway, you know, rapper Shine got out of prison and moved to Jerusalem and, you know, became Jewish, and for a minute he was walking around with his locks and all this stuff, you know. If I was really that hung up, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. This is not about that. But still, the facts are the facts. And so, is it so much that Jews have a propensity for communism, or is it just that not just Jews, but Germans in particular, because Germans are well represented in fields such as engineering and science and academia? Okay. And so is it something that is part and parcel of Jews, far as, who knows, maybe it's a genetic thing perhaps? Or, and I'm being tongue in cheek when I say that, or is it something that is, I guess, part and parcel of the academic experience? Because what became of liberalism, the idea or the ideal of liberalism, round about the turn of the 19th going into the 20th century, what was liberalism becoming as a philosophy? And it isn't so much about the Jewish people as it is about what came to define academia. And of course, if Jews are overly represented in the German Jews in particular are overly represented in that particular field, then I think that it is fair to assume or to say, well, why wouldn't they in fact be in line with the rest of the German and European intelligentsia? They were. This is why the intelligentsia in every group tends to harbor a lot of these theoretical ideas that go on to become a detriment to the people to whom they claim to represent. The black intelligentsia is no different. But then again, we blame the status of the black intelligentsia on the Jewish intelligentsia because it is the Jewish intelligentsia that made black people this way. Again, more excuses. Told you guys. Well, anyway, I'll mention some folks. I'll mention some names as we go through. But let's get into this. Let's get into the particulars. All right. I told you guys last time, and I need to stop doing this because I never know how it's going to play out and what I'm going to say. I told you guys last time that I was going to bring in the Soviet Union. We're going to talk about the Soviet Union and how this idea of Arab liberation really began to kick off during the Cold War era. And it was the Soviet Union that sent many of their Muslim-trained operatives into the Middle East and in parts of Africa to help spread these revolutionary ideas. And so, but I wanted to talk about it, but I didn't get to it because I wanted to give a brief, what I thought would be a brief synopsis about the creation of Israel and how it came into being. And I thought it was going to be brief, but a brief breakdown of the creation of Israel turned into 11 pages worth of notes. And so I had to make this entire discussion about the creation of Israel because I want to move back to my wheelhouse, what I do most, which is to talk about and to break down the Cold War and to break down communism in the 20th century. But I want to talk about the creation of Israel today. But eventually, maybe by part 4, we'll get into how and why The Soviet Union and the wider global left turned on the state of Israel. Why and how did the left turn on the state of Israel? Now, let's get into it. Now, let us move back to 2nd century AD and talk about the creation of Israel. And I'll just start where many of you are probably already familiar with. We all tend to start off. Again, and everybody, this is one of those issues that people are passionate, they're just so gung-ho passionate about, especially a lot of Christians today. And I'll be the first to tell you that theology is not, this is not so much a theological discussion. We'll talk about a little theology. We're going to quote from some holy books a little bit, but not a lot. This issue is twofold. Because first and foremost, the question is that how do we as human beings create a world that is where conflict is mitigated to the point where the burden of life becomes a little bit more manageable, because no matter how hard you strive, no matter how hard you try, people are going to be different. Again, this is part and parcel of the humanist secular enlightenment tradition. Oftentimes we use the term secular and we use it in a way that is meant to be, it has a negative connotation, but secularism does have its place when properly applied. All right. And again, maybe that's another discussion for another day, to really talk about liberalism, what it began as, what it was intended to be, and how and why it eventually became what it became. How do we as human beings find a way to get along? And what legitimate role does the state have to play in assuring certain rights and certain dignity for all human beings in spite of their religious affiliation? Sure enough, if you are a Christian, you would like everyone to be a Christian. If you're a Muslim, you would like everyone to be Muslim. But that's just not going to happen. Or maybe it will, but how will that come about is the question. Will it be some sort of divine type of intervention, or will it be something else? And what do we do about it in the meantime? Again, these are not easy questions. But again, was the promise of the Enlightenment that brought forth an idea that I think was granted its legitimacy thanks solely to the Judeo-Christian tradition, which makes secular governance possible in the first place, which is something separate and apart from the ethics of Islam or Islamic law. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. But again, so let's start here in the we're going back to 2nd century AD, and we're going to talk about the Bar Kokhba revolt. Everybody who you talk about Israel, Palestine, a lot of people have heard of the name Simon Bar Kokhba. Simon Bar Kokhba is Aramaic for the son of the star. Okay. Simon Bar Kokhba, also known as the fake Messiah. Now I'm going to get to my notes. I'm trying to run through this as quickly as I can. I'm going to try to leave out a lot of tangents because I have a lot of quotes, a lot of very long quotes, and a lot of names in here. So let's get going. So Simon launched a rebellion against the Roman Empire in 132 AD in response to Emperor Hadrian's Romanization campaign. And what was that? The Romanization campaign was aimed at spreading Greek culture into Jerusalem with the goal of assimilating Jews into the wider culture. Circumcision was outlawed. A Roman colony was erected in Jerusalem, and a temple to the god Jupiter was built upon the ruins of the Holy Temple, which is the modern day Temple Mount. Of course, where you have the Wailing Wall, and of course you have the Dome of the Rock in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, Simon Bar Kokhba was announced by a rabbi named Akiva ben Yosef, who gave him the title Bar Kokhba, again, which means son of the star. Simon's band of rebels took the colony of Alaya and annihilated Rome's Egyptian legion. Hadrian sent reinforcements into Jerusalem and eventually retook the city. I'm giving you a quick, brief version because I just want to kind of talk about where this all started, where this all began. Because again, what is modern day Israel or modern day Palestine was at the time a part of the Roman Empire. Simon Bar Kokhba himself was killed by Roman forces in Bethar, which is the modern day West Bank, in 135 AD. Excuse me. Jewish casualties were approximated between 550 and 600,000. Judea was left destroyed. Some of the surviving Jews were executed and others exiled, and Jerusalem was prohibited to Jews for the next 3 centuries. So Jews were permitted or were prohibited from entering Jerusalem for the next 3 centuries. Again, you know, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, if you aren't familiar with it, shame on you. If you're even interested in this topic, because it's one of the first things that people will discuss, the false messiah that was Simon Bar Kokhba. Now, and I'm trying to pronounce it, you know, my Hebrew, I'm trying to do the best I can, but y'all get the point. So the land of Judea, which encompasses Jerusalem, was renamed Philistine by the Romans after the ancient city-state confederation of Philistia. Philistia, who were defeated by the Assyrian Empire around 132 BC. The Greek pronunciation of Philistine is, of course, Palestine. It's funny how that works, right? You know, you get these, you know, first it was the Philistia. I forgot the 5 cities that composed the city-state confederation of Philistia, but that's nor here nor there. Then you had the Assyrians come in, and then of course the Assyrian Empire was later defeated by the Babylonian Empire. I think it was under Nebuchadnezzar II. And so it's funny how people move about in political boundaries and things shift and change. That's the way things happen. All right. But of course, you know, that's not allowed to happen today, especially if the so-called ruling powers are Jewish, Christian, or let's just say pale-faced. How's that? Now, Simon Bar Kokhba's legacy would forever be tarnished, even among his Jewish brethren, earning the new label of Bar Kokhba. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but in English, it means son of the lie. Now, let's ask ourselves this question. We talk about the Jews returning to the Holy Land. All right. Did the Jews truly abandon the Holy Land is the question. Well, let's talk about it. Again, you know, because people want to know, man, what is going on with this place? Why are we concerned with it? Why are we even talking about it? Again, the left has this anti-colonial thing. This whole, again, we know why the left has the stance that it has, right? If you don't know, then you shouldn't even be here. But again, this is about a lot of folks within the so-called conservative right who have pretty much lost their damn minds. They've lost their damn minds. And I'm talking primarily about Candace Owens and to a lesser extent, men like Tucker Carlson and others. Their damn brains done fell out. So let's talk about it. Although a slight Jewish presence would remain, and you're going to see as we move forward, it was not until 438 AD when Empress Eudokia, wife of Roman Emperor Theodosius II, lifted the ban on Jews praying in the Holy Land during her pilgrimage to Jerusalem that same year. Born Athanasius, Empress Eudokia was accused of adultery by her sister-in-law Pulcheria and thus was banished to Palestine beginning in 443 AD. The empress was further ostracized for her embrace of Monophysite theology, a heresy that maintained that Christ's nature is absorbed in his divine nature, but she died an Orthodox Christian. Now, Monophysitism, what is that? I think, again, I'm not going to go off into all of that because I'm not a theologian, not a biblical scholar by habit or by hobby. But Monophysitism is believed to be, by some religious historians, to be the key ingredient in the creation of Islam. Put that on your brain and you can study that on your own another day. Now, a good number of Jews began to immigrate back to Jerusalem, only for some to be stabbed and stoned by local monks, who were later acquitted, claiming that the stones fell from heaven. Now, of the Crusades, I'm running through. I'm running through, so I got a lot of stuff. Of the Crusades, 12th century historian, poet, and schoolmaster al-Azimi, known as the chronicler of the history of Aleppo, wrote that once the Crusaders arrived, they burned the church of the Jews. Another of the Arab Muslim historians from Syria, Ibn al-Kalanisi, that's how you pronounce his name. I wrote it down here. Ibn al-Kalanisi, author of the continuation of the Chronicle of Damascus, writing in the 12th century of the First Crusade, quote, "The Franks stormed the town and gained possession of it. A number of the townsfolk fled to the sanctuary, and a great host were killed. The Jews assembled in the synagogue, and the Franks burned it over their heads. The sanctuary was surrendered to them on guarantee of safety. Was surrendered to them on guarantee of safety on 22 Shaban, and they destroyed the shrine and the tomb of Abraham." Now, who are the Franks? Again, if you don't know the history of the Crusade, I don't have time to get into it, but the Franks, the term Franks just became this catch-all word that those outside of Europe used to describe the Latin-speaking Christians that came from the West. Again, you had the Latin-speaking West, and you had the Greek-speaking East. And you had the East that was sort of like that buffer zone that was at the forefront, kind of keeping the hordes of the Saracens at bay. And then you had those that were coming from the West to try to sort of rid the Holy Land of the barbarous element that were the Muslims. Now, once and again, in those in the West had a lot of these catch-all terms to describe these hordes of Muslims. They called them Saracens, or of course, they also called them Moors. Franks, even, of course, Franks once the Franks controlled Jerusalem for a time, they again reinstated the ban and barred Jews from entering Jerusalem. I know it's a popular thing. We all think that, we think that this commentary about anti-Semitism, we think that it has been overblown by Jews for the purpose of their, nefarious and wicked and evil goals of manipulation. And so you can't criticize a Jew because they'll accuse you of anti-Semitism, and boom, next thing you know, you're ruined. And so it becomes this scary thing, you see. And Jews simply wield this intimidation tactic over the heads of people. Okay, but what kind of Jews are we talking about? Because I talk about Jewish people all the time. Have been. What do you think if I say something about George Soros, or if I say something about any George Soros, or the Austrian, a lot of the Austrian and Hungarian and German intellectuals of the Frankfurt School, all of whom were Jewish. I talk about Karl Marx all the time, right? And so again, this was a fallback of a lot of leftists during the 1940s. Even if you read the writings and the works of the mentor of Barack Obama, none other than Frank Marshall Davis, he accuses those who were engaging in trafficking in the kind of red under every bed, this whole red panic phenomenon. He accused them of not only being anti-Semites, but also accused them of being partnered, if not outright, or accused them of being partnered with, if not at worst or at best, and at worst, he accused them of being actual members of the Ku Klux Klan, because to attack communism was to be a racist, or was to be anti-black, and to be Of course, to accuse someone of being a communist is really just a dog whistle for being an anti-Semite. And I get it. That's why we say that that's some BS. We don't believe that. And so it becomes this fickle, this hard thing to really wrap your mind around. Well, what exactly is it? What do we mean when we talk about it? Well, that is because Jew bigotry or Jew hatred has taken on a different style and a different character down through the centuries. Again, I won't get into, because that'll be a whole nother discussion about the history of Jewish suppression across Europe during the Middle Ages. It happened. You don't want to believe it, right? You think that, well, it only goes one way. No, it goes both ways. And at times, to be fair, a lot of Jews preferred to live under Muslim rule than under Christian rule. They made that choice. Because there were times when Christians weren't so nice to Jews. But over time, that relationship was slowly but surely mended. Again, and that's another question as to why and how it all sort of transpired. But again, absolute power corrupts. I'm not here to necessarily have a religious discussion, but a lot of you Christians kill me because you claim to embrace the kind of the universality or the universal nature of the atonement, whilst at the same time either implying or outright expressing that there is some sort of unique hedge over the head of the Jew that makes him especially prone to deviance. This is why I said what I said in the last part about a lot of the attitudes of a lot of the German Marxist theoreticians. A lot of the attitudes that they had about Jews mirrors a lot of the attitudes that a lot of so-called conservatives have about Jews today. And what disgusts me is that they do it in the name of Christianity. Well, if you believe in the fallen nature of man, then why in the world wouldn't the Christian church be just as corrupt as the synagogue? Is that not what the Bohemian and then the subsequent Protestant Reformation was about in the first place? And then you had the whole nonconformist movement that stemmed off from the Protestant Reformation when the Church of England tried to rein in its quote unquote nonconformists, because you then had people of the Protestant strain who didn't want to be under the yoke of the Church of England. So there's always been rebellions against church authority or religious authority. And there have always been rivalries between faiths. Again, it's not why I'm here. What's up, Jambalaya Talks? I hope I can impress you. Jambalaya Talks, she's probably more of an authority on this topic than I am. I hope I don't say nothing to make her mad. I hope I don't want her getting at me in the comment section, but I don't want to hurt my feelings. But anyway, let's get back to this. Despite centuries of religious hostilities amongst Muslims, Christians, and Jews, there were about 30 Jewish communities within the region of Palestine by the end of the 15th century. By this time, the city of Constantinople had finally fallen and the reign of the Sultanate had begun. I talked about this at the end of part 2 as well. By this time, And in 1576, Sultan Murad III issued a firman, which means a royal or holy decree, ordering the deportation of more than 1,000 wealthy Jewish families from Safad, which is northern Israel, which is located in northern Israel near the Golan Heights, to Cyprus, an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, to help bolster the Cypriot economy. Now, wait a minute. Just 2 weeks ago, I was on a live stream and I made it a point to tell people. I talked about the Chinese and I talked about the Jews. I said that there is a seemingly inherent cultural dynamic that propels Jews and Chinese people to success. It's just, no matter where the Jews go, no matter where the Chinese go, they oftentimes find success. If there is a space carved out for them figuratively speaking, to operate, this is what tends to happen. The Chinese are prosperous wherever they go, which is why they incur the wrath of a lot of their host countries when they are, in fact, the minority. Jews are no different. And I said, in spite of how you feel about it, Jews often succeed. I don't care if you're talking about entertainment. I know y'all, we hate them because they're the ones who put the rappers out. They're the ones who created gangster. I'm so sick and tired of all this BS, as if there isn't an open and a market there sitting there, arms wide open, ready to just take it in, which to me signifies the fact that, once again, as an Adamite, you yourself are just as corruptible because you buy it, you purchase it, you take it in, you ingest it, and you help to promote it and perpetuate it. But see, when you can take the world, it is easier to pass the buck than to take accountability for one's own actions. It sounds simple, but again, for some strange reason, it's a very hard thing to do, because we look out at the world and we want it to be simple. We want it to be easy. We want to take the complicated and overly simplify it. And this form of oversimplification comes in the way of pointing at that particular group of people, whether it be Jews or whether it be anybody else, and saying to ourselves that if we could just get rid of that element, then all of a sudden there would be this spontaneous nirvana, this spontaneous Valhalla, if we can just get rid of them. Because that makes things sound, not only does it make it sound simple, but it actually makes it sound like it's something that's even partially or somewhat workable. Because the problem is not me, you see. So when I said what I said about the Jews and the Chinese, I said that Jews prosper wherever they go. Somebody in the comment section, I was doing a live stream, I was on the Cutting Through the Culture show, and someone said, and I didn't even have a chance to respond to him because I probably would have went off. Or maybe not, because the person is, they oftentimes, they watch our content, stuff like that. And, whatever. Feel free to disagree. Most of the time, that person is supportive. But they said something that was extremely stupid. They said that, Jews may prosper, but other people suffer. So wherever Jews go, they prosper at the expense of everyone else. Got it. So is that true? Is it a zero-sum game? In order for the Jews to win, everybody else has to lose? Is that how it works? Is that what Dr. Thomas Sowell taught you about economics? Is that what Edmund Burke taught you about philosophy? Is that what St. Augustine taught you about theology? Or is that what Candace Owens taught you? Let's continue. So again, Murad III ordered rich Jews to Cyprus to bolster their economy. The firman read as such: at present, I have ordered that 1,000 Jews be registered from the town of Safed. I'm sorry, I think it's pronounced Safed. My apologies. And its districts. Let me start over. Jeez, I'm trying to rush. At present, I have ordered that 1,000 Jews be registered from the town of Safed and from its districts and be sent to the city of Famagusta in Cyprus. I command that as soon as their order arrives, without delay and in accordance with my noble firman, you register 1,000 rich and prosperous Jews and send them with their property and effects with their families under appropriate escort to the said city. Once the Jews have been inscribed in the register, do not afterwards, by practicing extortion, remove them from it. Why would he even have to say that? Perhaps there was some extorting going on. Send a sealed copy of the register to the Felicius. I was funny because when I wrote down the decree and I was sitting there and I was reading it, I kept going over that word over and over again and then practicing it over and over again, so as not to trip over it. Felicitous. Okay, to my felicitous threshold. Thus, In the course of conscribing and registering the prescribed number of Jews, if anyone receives protection or any are removed from the register, and instead of them others are taken, so that in their place not rich but poor Jews are conscribed, your excuses will by no means be acceptable. It will be secretly investigated and dealt with. So we say, don't send them poor Jews, send the rich ones. If you accidentally send the poor ones, that's your ass. It is proper that if it becomes known to us that the matter has been handled in a manner contrary to our noble command, then assuredly it will not end with your disposition, but you will be most severely punished. Accordingly, be diligent and avoid anything contrary to our noble command. So you can see that Jews were used as these economic spurs to help kind of get things going throughout the empire. And we also seen this in other instances as well. Russia would do this. Different European nation states would do this at times. They would open their gates, open themselves up to Jewish immigration to help bolster the economy. And then once, you'll see, because the same thing that happens in other countries is what eventually happened in the region of Palestine. And you're going to see as we move forward. But it's funny, you need Jews until you don't need them no more. Somebody said last time about the anyway, let me keep going. I said I wasn't going to be doing a lot of tangents because I'm trying to get through this. And I got my producer behind the camera. If anything goes awry here, lights cut off, whatever, the battery start to dip low, wrap me up and we'll finish out at another time. Now, on February 18, 1577, roughly a year after the decree, the Jews of Safed petitioned Murad III to protect them against extortion, robberies, and violence. The request read, quote, the Sanjak Beg or Bey, which is a local Ottoman official, troubles us at present, saying, quote, most certainly you shall work on Shabbat, which is Sabbath. He also demands excessive amounts of money, as we are not in possession to pay the money. He makes us transport dung on the day of Shabbat. So, to demean Jews, the local Ottoman officials had the Jews shoveling shit on Saturday, on their Sabbath, as a means to embarrass or to dehumanize them. And they had to send a request to the Sultan to please have your official stop extorting us and forcing us to work on the Sabbath. The Turkish caliphate throughout its reign imposed taxes upon Jews and Christians in accordance with Islamic law. This is per the Quran, chapter 9, verse 29. It reads, quote, listen, fight those who do not believe in Allah in the last day, even though they were given the scriptures, and who do not hold as lawful that which Allah and his messenger have declared to be unlawful, and who do not follow the true religion. Fight against them until they pay tribute out of their hands and are utterly subdued. This is, of course, in reference to the jizya. You guys heard the term the jizya, which is a type of taxation historically levied on against non-Muslim subjects of a state governed by Muslims in compliance with Islamic law. So all of this talk, you hear people talk about usury, the Jews and the Kabbalistic banking system and all this garbage. All right, well, let's do away with it. Let's do away with the private capital markets, and just we don't need banks. We don't need lending and interest and this and that. Just get rid of it today, because obviously it's wrong. If it's wrong, then wouldn't logic dictate if we didn't have it? Wouldn't we be better off? They sure as heck wouldn't be better off, because they are the exploiters. They are the ones benefiting from the system that shouldn't be. It's wrong. Again, not getting into what scripture has to say about usury. What is usury? Let guys debate it in the comment section. Let you put it on your mind. But why do you hear so much about quote unquote usury, but not as much about taxation? And an asymmetrical type of taxation, because Muslims weren't taxed in this way, only Jews and Christians. But damn those Jews and all that usury. If I want something from you, I can't ask you, and then you promise to give me that and then some in return for the risk I take in giving you something up front that you needed but didn't have at the time. No. You have something that I want. I'll just take it. But it's the Jews because they run the banking system. Just imagine if everything that you own, everything that you have in your possession today, you acquired as a result of some kind of loan. Imagine if you didn't have it tomorrow. It's a cold game, man. What an imperfect world we live in, right? What are we going to do about it? We can make the world perfect, y'all. We can make it better. It's those Zionists we got to worry about. This shit is so dumb, y'all. It's so fucking. I'm so. Pardon my language. I'll stop. I don't curse as much as I used to because my followers told me to stop and I need to chill, and I do need to chill. And being in the company of great men like Chad O. Jackson has made me a better man, and I'm trying to chill. But let me tell y'all something, man. I'm not one of y'all. I'm not one of these new. Again, I call them Johnny Come Ladies. I'm not one of these new young black conservatives who just come on here because, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not one of y'all. If you don't like it, if you don't like what I have to say, then you can kick rocks because I'm my own man with my own mind. I'm not one of y'all. I don't run around talking about Jews and demeaning them and refusing to use the term Jew, calling them small hats and all that stupid shit. I'm not doing that. And that's not what I do here. So if that's what you're looking for, kick rocks. And like I told you last time, I'm not scared. I'm not afraid to talk about anything or anybody. You know good and goddamn well you aren't afraid of the Jewish community. But if I took you through a stroll in my neck of the woods, yeah, we'll see how tough you really are. And I'm not talking about no street shit. Because I live near Dearborn. I live near Dearborn Heights. And you better make sure you had a wrong opinion. Have the right opinion when you out that way. You might not make it out of there. Right. I know. But I'm scared. On life in the Ottoman Empire for Jews and their desire to remain in the Holy Land, a Jesuit priest, Father Michael Naud, who visited Galilee in the 17th century, wrote in 1674 that the Jews of Jerusalem were resigned to, quote, paying heavily to the Turks for their right to stay there. They prefer being prisoners in Jerusalem to enjoying the freedom they could acquire elsewhere. The love of the Jews for the Holy Land, which they lost through their betrayal of Christ, is unbelievable. 2 centuries later, in 1847, U.S. Navy Commander William F. Lynch made an expedition to the River Jordan, the Dead Sea, and the surrounding areas and encountered Jews all over the region. Wait a minute, I thought the Jews came in and took the land. While in Tiberias, which is a city near the Golan Heights off the Sea of Galilee, wrote, quote, we had letters to the chief rabbi of the Jews who came to meet us and escorted us through a labyrinth of streets to the house of Chaim Wiseman, a brother Israelite. The Jews of the city have 2 synagogues, the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim, but lived harmoniously together. There are many Polish Jews with light complexions among them. They describe themselves as very poor and maintained by the charitable contributions of Jews abroad, mostly in Europe. There are about 300 families or 1,000 Jews in this town. The Sanhedrin consists of 70 rabbis, of whom 30 are natives and 40 Franks, mostly from Poland, with a few from Spain. The rabbis stated that controversial matters of discipline among Jews all over the world are referred to this Sanhedrin. Besides the Jews, there are in Tiberias from 300 to 400 Muslims and 2 or 3 Latins from Nazareth. On his opinion of the Ottoman Empire, Lynch wrote, quote, "It needs but the destruction of that power which, for so many centuries, has rested like an incubus upon the Eastern world to ensure the restoration of the Jews to Palestine." Again, Israel is an apartheid state. But see, there doesn't seem to be a problem. See, for some reason, right, we accuse these various European empires of engaging in colonialism, imperialism, and all of these sorts of things, right? As if that wasn't the modus operandi of the day, because many different ethnic groups and different groupings of folks who sort of created a sense of community, which gave rise to some sort of legitimate governing structure of many types. Went about sort of building their societies and sustaining them along the same lines. The Turkish Empire is no different. The Turkish Empire was just as, if not more, oppressive than any other empire, right, that we claim is responsible for all the wrongdoings in the world. But again, this certainly seems to miss our friends on the left. And I say that, of course, tongue in cheek, because I ain't got no friends over there. And of course, you use the term incubus. The incubus is the demon that have sex with the woman when she's unconscious, right? It's kind of like a Jungian archetype for our night terrors, right? Our nightmares. So the Turkish Empire was quite the menace. So despite the harsh conditions, Jews were dedicated as a matter of their faith conviction to make a life in the Holy Land as opposed to living elsewhere. But how bad was the Promised Land under the Ottomans, you may ask? And Hal Lindsey was a Christian Zionist. Zionist. That's that word. Those Zionists, right? What does that word even mean? Zionism. It just sounds, I don't know, maybe it's the Z sound. There's not a lot of words in the English language that starts with a Z. Maybe when we hear the Z sound, it just kind of sends us into a tizzy. I don't know. You either support the existence of the Jewish state or you don't. It's funny because it seems as though we don't have any serious opposition to any other kind of state. But again, I swear, and it makes me mad, some of you who say these things in the name of Christianity. It's disgusting. It's like you don't have the foggiest idea what you're talking about. But far be it for me to say, because again, if you want, don't come to me for any type of religious guidance. I'm not the one. In Hal Lindsey's book, The Everlasting Hatred, The Roots of Jihad, Lindsey writes, quote, "The Holy Land under the Ottoman Turks suffered more devastation in 400 years than the previous 1500. By the 19th century, the ancient canal and irrigation systems were destroyed. The land was barren and filled with malaria-ridden swamps. The hills were denuded of trees and brush, so all of the terraces and topsoil had eroded away, leaving only rocks." So when it was under Byzantine rule, right? But for some reason, when the Turks took it over, it went to shit. And to quote Trump, it turned into a shithole. Now, by the early 1900s, after the first Aliyah, which in Hebrew means going up, conditions were so horrendous that Palestine's Arab Muslim occupants were eager to sell their land and holdings to anyone willing to pay the massive tax. There was no annexation or theft of Muslim land. There surely wasn't any theft of Palestinian land because the Palestinians, as we understand them today, hadn't been invented yet. But let me slow down. Because when you say they hadn't been invented yet, some of y'all probably like, what that mean? So I'm getting ahead of myself. The bottom line is the land was purchased, not stolen. But let me make the case if you don't believe me. Not only had, one, the Jews never completely left the land, but two, the land was not stolen. And thirdly, and most damning to the claim of the illegitimacy of the Zionist project is, after the Romans expelled the Jews, there were barely any Arabs there either. Shout out to one of the world's greatest living Middle Eastern historians, Orthodox Greek Christian, Mr. Robert Bruce Spencer, for a lot of these great references I'm about to lay on you. Here are some quotes from some very authoritative sources, right? Dio Cassius, born 150 AD in Nicaea and died in 235 AD, was a Roman historian and politician who wrote extensively about the history of Rome from its founding through the reign of Emperor Alexander Severus. He said of Judea in the early 3rd century, quote, "The whole of Judea became desert, as indeed had been foretold in their sacred rites. Fell of its own accord into fragments, and wolves and hyena, many in number, roaming, howling through the cities." Henry Mondrell, an Oxford academic and Church of England clergyman, wrote of his travels to the region of Palestine in 1697, stating, quote, "There is nothing here but a vast and spacious ruin." Another notable Englishman, fellow Oxford alum and cleric Thomas Shaw, writing in the mid 1700s, stated that Palestine is, quote, "lacking in people to till its fertile soil." The French Count Constantin Francois Volney, a Hebrew-speaking biblical scholar, historian, and world traveler, called Palestine, quote, "ruined and desolate," and had, quote, "lost all of its peasantry." Mind you, I'm going through these quick rapid fire because all of these men that I named should damn near get a whole Teach 'em Chuck style lecture on their own, because Constantin Francois Volney is a big deal. He's a very prominent man who did a lot of things and was very influential in the world of geopolitics at the time. Now, another Englishman, mind you, Zionism, let me just say this to cut to the chase right now. Zionism was largely spearheaded and spurred by British Christians, not Jews. Another Englishman, the 19th century author and journalist J.S. Buckingham, wrote of Ramla, which is a city between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, in 1816, quote, "As throughout the greater part of Palestine, the ruined portion seemed more extensive than that which is inhabited." The 25th Earl of Crawford, Alexander Lindsay, stated in 1838 that, quote, "all Judea except the hills of Hebron and the vales immediately about Jerusalem is desolate and barren." Alexander Lindsay was another big deal person, and he'll come up later as we move forward. One of the most important works on the history of Palestine was a book published in 1851 titled Thoughts on the Land of Mourning, a record of 2 visits to Palestine, written by English clergyman Henry Burgess Whitaker Churton. At a point in the book, Churton refers to the Bible when remarking on Palestine, stating, quote, "It is foretold in Ezekiel chapter 6, verse 14, and is remarkably fulfilled that Judea should be more desolate than the desert itself. That plain itself is now great measure barren as a desert." Now, of course, what does the book of Ezekiel chapter the book of Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 6, verse 14. What does it say? It says, I will stretch out my hand against them and make the land desolate. Yes, more desolate than the wilderness toward Deblah, or sometimes it's pronounced Reblah. In all their dwelling places, then they shall know that I am Lord. So many people begin to believe that this was a fulfilling of God's promise to make the Holy Land desolate. So you can see where a lot of Christians where this attachment to the land and support of Zionism was coming from. Now, approximately 1 year later, another prominent English clergyman who rose up to become the vicar of St. Peter's and St. Mary's Church of Star Market, Arthur George Harper Hollingsworth, published a book titled Remarks upon the Present Condition and Future Prospects of the Jews in Palestine. Hollingsworth said of the Ottoman government, quote, the Ottoman government is weak and violent, rapacious and uncertain in its justice, tyrannical and capricious. Their soldiery and merchants amount to a few thousand in a country where millions were formerly happy and prosperous. The influence of such a government never extends beyond the shadow of their standards. They are always in the attitude of a hostile army, encamped in a land which is only held by forcible possession. Like a garrison under arms, they retain the country by the law of the sword and not by inheritance. Again, these were Turks, and Turks are not Arabs. On the feeble Arab and Christian population, he writes, there, meaning Arabs and Christians, populations diminish every year. Poverty, distress, insecurity, robbery, and disease continue to weaken the inhabitants of this fine country. But of the Jews, Hollingsworth writes, amongst this scattered and feeble population of this once happy country is found, however, an increasing number of poor Jews. Some of their most learned men reside in the holy cities of Jerusalem, Hebron, and Tiberias. Their synagogues are still in existence. Jews frequently arrive in Palestine from every nation in Europe and remain there for many years, and others die with the satisfaction of mingling their remains with their forefathers' dust, which fills every valley and is found in every cave. He goes on. This Jewish population is poor beyond any adequate word. It is degraded in its social and political condition to a state of misery so great that it possesses no rights. The Jews had no rights. It can shew no wealth, even if possessed of it, because to display riches would secure robbery from the Mahometan population, the Turkish officials, and the Bedouin Arab. Okay. So y'all see what's happening? Remember, Turks are not Arabs. Persians are not Arabs. And Arabs themselves are extremely diverse. And you're going to see how what coalesced and how this idea of a universal, a homogeneous kind of Arab came into be. I'm going to talk about that here too. Again, even if you look at, for example, like say, Turkey, they speak a totally different language. In Iran, which is, again, even the people, you don't know this because the Iranian authorities do not allow you to see what goes on in Iran. You don't really know the attitudes of the people. Those who are able to escape will tell you that the outside of the elite class in Iran, they don't even see themselves as Iranian. They see themselves as Persian. As a matter of fact, they don't even see themselves as Muslim, because the true religion in the minds of many Iranians is Zoroastrianism, not Islam. Again, I say all of that because I know a lot of you know this, but I say all of this because I know that there are a lot of people out there who cannot distinguish the difference. They see an olive complected person and they're Muslim, and so there you have it. They must be Arab. But again, Arabs weren't always the central point of what they call the caliph or the caliphate of the Ummah, the international Muslim community. The point of the caliphate was with the Ottomans at the time. A lot of Arabs didn't like that, and you're going to find out. If I have not yet succinctly made the point, let us bring your attention to the most celebrated chronicler of 19th century Turkey, the illustrious and legendary Mark Twain. Y'all may have heard that. Y'all may have heard of him. I don't know. Some guy who penned perhaps the most well-known and copiously cited work in the defense of Zionism since its publication in 1869. In his book, The Innocents Abroad, Twain wrote of his travels to Palestine, quite poetically stating that, I love the way Twain puts this. Listen to Twain. Nazareth is forlorn. About that ford of Jordan where the hosts of Israel entered the promised land with songs rejoicing, one finds only a squalid camp of fantastic Bedouins of the desert. Jericho the accursed lies a moldering ruin today, even as Joshua's miracle left it more than 3,000 years ago. Bethlehem and Bethany, in their poverty and their humiliation, have nothing about them now to remind one that they once knew the high honor of the Savior's presence. The hallowed spot where the shepherds watched their flock by night and where the angels sang peace on earth, God will to men, is untenanted by any living creature and unblessed by any feature that is pleasant to the eye. Renowned Jerusalem itself, the stateliest name in history, has lost all its ancient grandeur and has become a pauper village. The riches of Solomon are no longer there to compel admiration of the visiting Oriental queens. The wonderful temple, which was the pride and the glory of Israel, is gone. The Ottoman crescent is lifted above the spot where, on the most memorable day of the annals of the world, they reared the Holy Cross. So who was it that rehabilitated the Holy Land? It wasn't the Muslim. Again, this area is sacred to both Jew, Muslim, and Christian. Right? Okay. So who has the right to control it? Well, nobody. Just share it. Oh, that's really? You have to have some sort of hegemonic power with the authority necessary to implement rules and regulations that equally apply to all persons in spite of what their religious tradition may be. Who would you rather have the Holy Land under the control of? Perhaps you want to say Christians. Okay, fair enough. But how about Muslims? What was the Holy Land like when Muslims controlled it? Well, Mark Twain just told you. Okay. Why are we so worried about it? Why we could... Again, but see, America is the seat of Western civilization. But where would Western civilization be? And I alluded to this before. Where would Western civilization be without the moral and philosophic contributions of the Hebrew race? Nowhere. It wouldn't be where it is today. It don't mean you old Jewish people something like you got to sit around and kiss their ass. I'm sure the majority of them ain't even thinking about you. But you think because, right, they are God's chosen people, that they got some superiority complex. No, that's your fucking hang up. That's your problem. It is what it is. So, now that we have an idea about who inhabited the land and the nature of the Turkish government leading up to the First World War, let us discuss the birth of Zionism and who, in fact, was opposed to it. It's recorded, Jambalaya. It's gonna be on my YouTube channel in a couple days. I'm not gonna put it up on Instagram, but it will be on my YouTube channel. Just give me maybe like 3 or 4 days, and I'll upload it. Recall the name from earlier, Lord Alexander Lindsay. It was from his 1938 book written after his travels through Palestine titled Letter on Egypt, Edom, and the Holy Land, where I derived the previous quote. Well, here are more important passages from that work remarking on the prospect of a Jewish settlement. It is possible that in the changes of the Turkish Empire, Palestine may again become a civilized country under Greek or Latin influences, that the Jewish race, so wonderfully preserved, and it's amazing how Jews are able to preserve their culture. A lot of it, I mean, you can talk about, Rabbi, what was it, Rashi, with the famous, again, with the Mishnah and the Gemara. Again, I'm not, leave that up to somebody else to do. I hear all these people, right? Talk about what Jews, it's in their literature, man. Hey, did you read the Talmud? You see what they say about the Goyim and all this other stuff? But you have Jews, religious Jews, who will tell you that the Talmud, much of it, if not all of it, is completely falsified. You have the written, you have the oral. Not all Jews believe that the Talmud is in fact sacred because it's the unwritten. Right? And many say, well, the whole thing with the Talmud was, of course, an effort on behalf of the rabbinic authority, kind of hovering, if you will, over the Jewish diaspora to try and kind of maintain the sanctity and the purity, so they perceived it, of Jewish culture, because Jews were beginning to, travel about the world, and they didn't want that Jewish Jewry, they didn't want it to be lost. And so in order for the rabbi to maintain their authority, they came up with this whole thing. Again, not trying to get into a deep dive into the Talmud, because it's a very complicated thing. I mean, for goodness sake, the Talmud in and of itself is over 2 million words. Again, not all Jews swear by it. Some will just dismiss it outright and say it's wrong because they feel as though that it was just a thinly veiled attempt on behalf of the rabbinic class to maintain their sense of power and authority, the same way in which the medieval church did when it came to Christianity. They said, well, read the book for yourself. If it's not written, right? If it isn't in the Torah or the Tanakh, then it's not, you don't need a written word, you don't need an interpreter. But again, let people debate that, all they want. I just think it's funny the way they kind of cherry pick these things that they don't really understand, you see. But when it comes to other things, say for example like the Quran, they ain't got nothing to say. It's just strange. So anyway, where did I leave off? The Jewish, it changes, become a civilized country under Greek and Latin influence. That the Jewish race, so wonderfully preserved, may yet have another stage of national existence open to them. On page 71 of the work, in a chapter titled Journey to Damascus, Lindsay writes, no other curse I conceive rests on it than that induced by the removal of the ancient inhabitants, and the will of the Almighty that the modern occupants should never be so numerous as to invalidate the prophecy that the land should enjoy her Sabbaths so long as the rightful heirs remain in the land of their enemies. So you see where we're going here. Now the political wheels are starting to turn in Great Britain, because see, you have to understand that at the time, Great Britain was at the forefront of this kind of new kind of Anglican empire, so to speak. And it was the same with respect to, for example, British Christians were unique at this time because they were sort of like at the vanguard. They were the vanguard of this kind of moral Christian sentiment and commitment. And part of that was sort of restoring the Holy Land to its glory, and also to rid the world of the peculiar, why I say it like that, to rid the world of the peculiar institution that was slavery. And so Great Britain went about the business of trying to, quote unquote, police the world in a way, thus to kind of rid it or correct it in a way that was more in line with what their Christianity, what their Christian sensibilities informed them in terms of what they thought was actually correct, righteous, decent, and moral. And so this was the role of the English Empire at the time. And so this is where you have to understand the British political scene and culture at the time in the 1800s. Anthony Ashley Cooper, the 7th Earl of Shaftesbury, because again, I'm trying to run through this because I got about 5 more pages, was one of the earliest proponents of the restoration of the Jews to the Holy Land and became president of the London Jews Society from 1848 until his death in 1885. Again, he was another Christian Zionist, so I guess we're just going to invalidate him. I guess all Zionists are liars. Oh, the Frankists. Oh, the Frankists. The Frankists. They created Israel. Oh, the Frankists. Israel was created by a bunch of Frankists. Got it. I got it, Candace. I got it. And so you mean to tell me, so we mad, right, Christians? Right? We accuse the Jews of deicide. They killed God. They killed the Messiah. You had a lot of propaganda campaigns underway, thanks to a lot of Christian men and Christian authorities throughout the Middle Ages, right? Because of this whole notion, this whole idea, right? We're going from the old to the new. Christianity was the new, out with the old. And so how dare you filthy Jews deny the divinity of Christ? How dare you? Right? Okay. And so Kanye West is brave. Kanye West is our brother. Kanye West is not afraid to say the scary part. He's not afraid to say the quiet part out loud about the Jews in the music industry or the Jews in general. He's not afraid to say the scary part out loud. Right. That makes him brave. Right. No, motherfucker. What's brave is when you can get control over your own goddamn life and your own affairs. That don't make you brave. When he went on the Alex Jones show and made a damn fool of himself. Talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, Doesn't have the foggiest idea, Benjamin Netanyahu, and what that man has actually done with his life, right? But of course, Kanye West has lived a better life than Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Wrong. But Candace Owens can say, well, we need to ban, pornography. We need to do this and we need to do that, and down with hip hop, down with gangster rap. But that's cancel culture when Kanye West drops an album, because you couldn't get to him, could you filthy Jew? He still came out with an album, right? That's your buddy. Is it because he's a good Christian? Or is it because he, quote unquote, stood up against your enemy? Because the Jew can deny that Christ is the Messiah, but somebody like Kanye West can sit up there and blaspheme by claiming that he is God himself. But that's still your friend. I got it. Don't worry. You can try to defend Andrew Tate all you want to. Just watch. Y'all talking about Diddy? Oh, Andrew Tate, he next. But man, when I just, I was calling out to God, and I said, God, and nobody came for me. Nobody helped. He back on his Jesus tip now. That's right. Went from Jesus as king to all of a sudden he God again. Where you at, Miss Owens? That's your friend? I know. His blasphemy is okay. When Andrew Tate gets up there and says he's converting to Islam because the Christian man has become weak, he's still your friend. You even run cover for him when he openly admits, just as recently as 2001, 2022, to doing the exact thing that he was indicted for thanks to the Romanian establishment. And went and said and bragged about teaching courses online to other young men about how to manipulate women into falling in love with them through sex and then using them as sex workers. But that's your friend. A Muslim. Broad, I see right through your ass. I ain't like them other ones. Let's move on. Back in 1839, upon reading the work of Lord Lindsay, Cooper wrote in an article for the Quarterly Review, the The soil and climate of Palestine are singularly adapted to the growth of produce required for the exegesis of Great Britain. The finest cotton may be obtained in almost unlimited abundance. Silk and madder are the staple of the country, and olive oil is now, as ever was, the very fatness of the land. Capital skill are only required. The presence of a British officer and the increased security of property which his presence will confer may invite them from these lands to the cultivation of Palestine, and the Jews who will betake themselves to agriculture in no other land, having found in the English council a mediator between their people and the Pasha, will probably return in yet greater numbers and become once more the husbandmen of Judea and Galilee. So what Shaftesbury is saying, he's saying, listen, man, there's some resources in here. Now, you can say, well, yeah, he was probably trying to do it for Great Britain's advantage. But again, economics is not a zero-sum game. It would have benefited the inhabitants of the region, Judea, Galilee, right? And it also would have benefited the core of the British Empire. But all Salisbury is saying that we need people here that actually know what they're doing. We need the Jews. It's funny how you need them until you don't need them. According to the writer Victoria Clark, in her book Allies for Armageddon, wrote of Shaftesbury's style of religious pot-licking in the cause of the Jews and their homeland is what links Britain's Arthur J. Balfour and Lloyd George to America's President Harry Truman, to fundamentalist televangelists like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, who built the American religious right in the 1980s and 1990s. So the Zionist cause is the American right and has its links all the way back to Shaftesbury, according to this writer, right? And we're going to talk about James Arthur Balfour just briefly. It is believed that it was Lord Shaftesbury who coined the phrase, a land without people for a people without land. Now, as British officials continued to press the issue, the Ottomans pushed back at every turn, rebuffing efforts of British diplomacy that entailed further influxes of Jewish migrants, even going so far as to ban Jewish immigration altogether and deporting resident Jews from long-existing settlements, i.e. in 1917, the Ottomans rounded up 7,000 Jews living in Jaffa and kicked them out of Palestine. The Jewish population in Palestine decreased by approximately 1/3 from before the war to after. Now, when did the Arabs arrive? Let's go try to go through this fast because I know y'all bored. Let me get y'all up out of here. When did the Arabs arrive? A few key factors. Number one, the conquest of Greater Syria in 1830 to 1831 by Muhammad Ali, the ruler of Egypt, helped to bring Egyptian and Sudanese Muslims to the cities of Jaffa, Nablus, and Baisan. Two, in 1830, the French conquered the city of Algiers, which led many North African Muslims to flock eastward so as not to live under the rule of the infidel. These North African transplants were noted by the British Christian residents of the time to be amongst the most fanatical and barbarous. Coupled with these political and territorial shifts, Western standards of culture and trade had begun to transform the Near East into a desired destination. Oh, you don't say. It's funny how that happens. This is Western culture. This is about culture and civilization. This is about, see, to me, theology is, it involves primarily and chiefly, it revolves around matters of the soul. This here is something different because culture does not offer you salvation, but culture does offer you membership. It offers you membership to a community of individuals who have a mutual interest in maintaining order and stability within that community. There's a reason if you have a Jewish neighbor or Muslim neighbor across the street, the two of you have a mutual interest in making sure that certain things happen or that certain things don't happen in the community for the benefit of both individuals. Because what defines a collective in the secular sense is its civic character, the nation. This is why societies are not created by race or by religion. This runs counter to the Enlightenment idea. This is the Muslim idea. This is the Islamic idea. This is why Islam and classical liberalism and the secular society that the Judeo-Christian creed gave birth to is antithetical to the Islamic creed, because there's a finality about it, because religion is final. God said, if you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell. Fine. A Muslim will look at me and tell me, you don't believe upon Allah, you're going to hell. All right, cool. I'm going to hell, you going to hell. Cool, bro. Let's go have a beer. I don't even drink beer, but I'm just saying. Let's go watch the game, bro. Right? That's it. It's the secular law. Laws created by men. Why would other men be obligated to abide by the laws created by men, when prior to, men were obligated only to follow laws that were created by God? Well, who in fact is capable of even interpreting what it is that God says, what God wants, what God believes. This is vital to the whole idea and the notion of the separation of church and state. There are two components, two ethical components contained within the Christian creed: repentance and forgiveness. What did Jesus say? Love God with all your heart and love thy neighbor as you love yourself. That's it. I want him to convert, but what can I do? I still got to love him. What does that love entail? What does that love mean? Again, totally separate conversation. But you must repent. I am wrong. I admit. Humility. Forgiveness. Forgive my brother for what he has done wrong. What that does is that cures a man's heart of his resentment. That's how you can have a political system wherein one can negotiate, because religion is final. Politics is the realm of negotiation. Let's talk about it. We don't negotiate with God. God tell us what to do, and that's what it's going to be. And you still, again, you got to find a way to navigate that. It ain't easy. But again, we think that society building is easy, especially a lot of Christians. I'm not Christians, people who consider themselves to be politically conservative. I'm seeing a lot of hubris and naivete, because you think you got the answer, but you don't. Because everything that you think needs to be done has already been tried. Look what happened to you. You talk about the Middle East today, and it's warring, it's quarreling, and such and so forth. Because most Muslims don't want to live that way. Look at all of the wars that Europe was. If you don't know the history of Europe in the 19th century, 18th century, then my God, the wars between France and Britain and Germany, and I mean, it just went on and on and on and on, and much of it had to do with religion in Europe, until they had to come up with, okay, we got to figure out a way to work this out. This is why the great Edmund Burke is considered to be the father of modern day conservatism, because he had a unique perspective, because his mother was Catholic and his father was Protestant. And he said that the conflict will never remedy itself. So the state has to take up another role. And don't get me wrong, that there will always be individuals within the system that will exploit it, because liberalism has been exploited to the point that it is beyond recognition. But there are no perfect solutions, only trade-offs. Because the problem is not whether we live under theocracy, a monarchy, a republic, a democracy, a this, or that, Sharia. The problem is not the system. The problem is us. As a Christian, I thought you understood that. Oh, no, that's right. It's the Jewish cabal. Coupled with these political and territorial shifts, Western standards of culture and trade have begun to transform the Near East into a desired destination. In 1938, American author and revisionist Zionist, that's a different type of branch of Zionism, we ain't gonna get into it. William B. Ziff wrote, quote, "Not until the Zionists arrived in numbers did the Arab population begin to augment itself." For all of those of you in Rio Linda, the word augment means to increase. The introduction of European standards of wage and life acted like a magnet on the entire Near East. Abruptly, Palestine became an Arab center of attraction. Wait a minute, what? Wait a minute, I thought it was colonization and oppression going on. He said, mind you, listen close what he said. He didn't say Jewish per se. He said because of the Zionist resettlement colonization project, he said the introduction of European standards. Again, not just Jewish, but there's a Jewish race, a Jewish faith, but there's also a European culture. That's different from Asian or Middle Eastern culture. It's different. Of course, the great Winston Churchill, maybe some of y'all have heard of him, I don't know, some guy, famously quipped in 1939 in response to the claim of Arab persecution, quote, "Far from being persecuted, the Arabs have crowded into the country." And again, y'all know it's true because, again, look at what we're doing today, right? America is this racist, America and all of our Europe is just this bastion of white supremacy and racism, yet we can't keep niggas out of here. We can't, you know what I mean? We can't beat them away with a stick. We can't chase them away with a grenade. They want to come to our country and be oppressed. Same way folks, Arabs, people all over the region want to come to Palestine just to live under Jewish oppression. Half y'all mofos don't even know what the hell going on in your own backyard. Y'all don't even understand what's going on in American politics, but you know something about Israel and their domestic policy positions and so on and so forth. You know for a fact that Israel is doing such and so forth. Well, ask an Arab Muslim living in Israel proper how they are treated. You'd be shocked. I know you'd be shocked because you got your head too far up your ass. But again, America is oppressive. But yet you new school, you new breed black conservatives especially, you love to talk about how white supremacy is a myth and how the Democrat Party and liberals are selling us victimhood to control us and blah, 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 keeping us in the state. But Jewish oppression, that's real right there, dog. That's real right there, dog. Yeah, no, that's real. Okay. I guess, right, Anglo oppression, that don't exist. Jewish oppression, no, that's real. I'm telling you, man, I'm not the one. I'm not here for that. I'm not on your side. Like I say, if you want to go in the corner somewhere, go on to some fringe part of the internet and talk about that. I'm not interested. I'm not interested at all. At all. The devil's a liar. Arguably, the most consequential Zionist in human history is the father of modern Zionism, none other than Theodor Herzl, the Austro-Hungarian Jewish journalist, lawyer, playwright, and activist who wrote possibly the most succinct work in the cause of Jewish resettlement called Das Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state. This was published in 1896. On the Jewish question, Herzl writes, "No one can deny the gravity of the Jews' situation. Wherever they live in perceptible numbers, they are more or less persecuted. Their equality before the law, granted by statute, has become practically a dead letter. They are barred from filling even moderately high positions, either in the army or in any public or private capacity. And attempts are made to crowd them out of business also. No dealing with Jews." On the prospect of Jewish assimilation and Arab-Jew cohabitation, Herzl wrote, "The Jews are supported by none of the powers and have no military pretensions of their own. There need be no difficulty with the local population. Thereby, in trying to remove non-Jews, there need be no difficulty with the local population." Nobody is trying to remove non-Jews. Okay, again, Jews are so duplicitous and fork-tongued, they just lie. So Theodor Herzl is obviously lying. "The local population can only benefit from the prosperity that the Jews will bring. Do you believe that an Arab who has a house or land in Palestine whose value today is 3,000 or 4,000 francs will regret seeing the price of his land rise 5 or 10-fold? Gentrification? The Jews are gentrifying Palestine. Right? They're raising your property values because they are making your property a more attractive destination, because that's the way economics works, right? It's a theory it's a kind of mathematical theory of human relationships, right? And it presupposes any sort of economic theorem. It's about economics. Essentially, it's about how we as human beings relate to one another, right? Prices can connote costs, but they don't always, but they can tell you what people value. And for some reason, people like being around Jews. I don't know what it is. Strange. But somebody told me wherever the Jews go, other people suffer. For that is necessarily what will happen as we Jews come. And that must be explained to the inhabitants of this country. They will become rich, and because of us, they will acquire excellent brothers, just as the Sultan will acquire loyal and good subjects who will cause this region, their historic motherland, to flourish. So Herzl is saying this again. This was long before the Balfour Declaration, long before the the United Nations the United Nations mandate for Palestine in 1920. This was before all of that. You have Herzl in 1896 saying that it's not even about who runs the government. We just want to be able to occupy the land of Palestine, and it will benefit our neighbors and benefit the Sultanate because he will have acquired loyal subjects. I know it's all a lie because that's what Jews do. They scheme, connive so they can take stuff over. How stupid do that sound? There ain't even enough of them motherfuckers to do that. But anyway, let me keep it moving. Pardon my language, but I'm heated because I've been holding this in for a long time, and I told y'all I wanted to do. I don't know how long it's gonna take me to land this plane. I may end up doing 6-7 parts of this whole Jewish thing because it's pissing me off because it tells you exactly where we are morally and exactly where we are intellectually when people don't even know which side they want to be on. It's madness. It's the Frankists. Herzl's proclamations were prophetic on one hand and tragically naive on the other. Jewish resettlement in Palestine beginning in the late 1890s led to an increase in Arab population as well, along with an increase in Arab wealth and prosperity, which lasted for over 3 decades until the infamous Arab Revolt of 1936. Things are getting bad. Hey, Jambalaya, I'm not really in the comment section. I'm kind of peeking over a little bit. I saw you just ask me a question. Do me a favor and just DM me on Instagram or something like that. Whatever, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, just in case I missed your question or your comment. What was the Arab Revolt of 1936? Well, the Arab Revolt, sometimes referred to as the Palestinian Revolt, was an uprising conducted by Palestinian Arabs against the British mandatory government and the Jewish population of Palestine from 1936 to 1939. So wait a minute, the Jews were prospering. The Arabs were prospering. They were getting wealthier and they still rebelled. Why? Well, let's figure it out. Arab actions included guerrilla warfare, attacks on civilians, arson, strikes, demonstrations, and other forms of terrorism and civil disobedience. A royal commission of inquiry presided over by 2-time British Prime Minister Lord Robert Peel was sent to investigate the volatile situation. Published in 1937, the Peel Commission, as it became known, declared that the revolt was caused by an Arab desire for independence and fear of the Jewish national home. The report found that the Arab and Zionist cause were irreconcilable, and thus the earliest call for a land of partition was put forth. But what details of great significance did the British investigation conclude? Here's an excerpt from the Peel report. Quote, "In the light of the foregoing considerations, we have come to the conclusion that despite the disproportion between their numbers and the amount of cultivable land they occupy, the fellahin, which is an Arab, I guess that's Arabic, but it means peasantry. It means Arab peasantry. So pretty much Arab farmers. The fellahin are on the whole better off than they were in 1920. They were better off. Again, maybe they lying because white people lie. But there is another consideration which has not yet been mentioned and one on which there can be no controversy. The whole range of, listen to this. The whole range of public services, the initiation of which we described in the preceding chapter, has steadily developed to the benefit of the Fellaheen, except in the periods of disturbance. So it benefits Arabs until they don't want to participate no more. They get mad and they want to tear up shit. Their lives and property have been reasonably safe. Their civil rights have been safeguarded by the courts. The growth in their numbers have been largely due to the health services, combating malaria, reducing the infant death rate, and improving the water supply and sanitation. This, by and large, is what European colonialism did for the rest of the world. Y'all don't hear me. Colonialism civilized the world. Zionism civilized the Middle East. For all y'all running y'all mouths, throwing this term Zionism around, don't even know what the hell it means. The intent of the British government with respect to its efforts to assist the Jewish settlement was made clear in the famous Balfour Declaration. Written on November 2nd, 1917, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour wrote a letter to Lord Lionel Walter Rothschild, and the letter reads, many of you have read it, it reads, I'll read it for you, it's a short letter. Dear Lord Rothschild. Again, that's that name, Rothschild. Ooh, whoa, Rothschild, they running the world, they killing us, they doing What y'all gonna do tonight, huh? What y'all gonna do on this Saturday? This is Saturday when I'm recording this. What y'all gonna do tonight, huh? Y'all gonna do something fun? What y'all gonna do? Y'all gonna go out, have a nice drink, nice date, hang out with your lady friend, your wife or something like that. You know, go to that one little jump off house, right? That you keep on messing with, that you ain't gonna marry. Huh? What you gonna do? Are you afraid a Rothschild is gonna what? Come, kick in the door and take it away from you? Huh? It's amazing how evil and wicked these people are, but yet still, y'all still running around playing grab ass. You still running around doing what you want to do. I'm just waiting for them to bring the hammer down at some point. Again, I don't believe in none of this stupid stuff no more. It's because when I was younger, I used to be like, oh, the elders of Zion and the Rothschild and the Rockefeller. Oh my God. We got to get rid of them. The Illuminati. But yet still, bro, what do you know? If we got rid of the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, and every other thing, every Zionist, we got rid of them today. What are we going to build in this place? Because you don't know how to do nothing. You just know how to wag the finger of indictment and damn and criticize and complain. You ain't no different from a leftist. I told you all when I started my Neo-Populism series that I was talking more so to conservatives this time around. Don't know how to build nothing, don't know how to do nothing. But you know the Jews are ruining Western civilization because they all a bunch of Marxists. And the evil Rothschilds running the world with their wicked maniacal banking system and carrying on. You don't have no wisdom. You don't have no knowledge. You don't know how to build anything. Why would I listen to you? Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of non-existing Jewish communities in Palestine. Again, they're telling you. But I know, but Palestine oppresses non-Jews and non-Muslims. That's what they do, right? That's what Tucker Carlson, that's what they said. Because if I got dropped off in the Middle East, I know where I'm going. I'm going straight to Gaza. I'm going straight to the West Bank. I'm going straight to Syria, straight to Egypt, down to the south. I'm going straight to Iraq, Syria to the north. I'm leaving. I don't want to live in Israel. I want to go somewhere else. I want to go to Jordan. I want to go somewhere else. I want to go to Lebanon. Oh, that's right. Yeah, there was a little thing, this little dust up happened in Lebanon not too long ago. It was a Christian country, but yeah, not no more. Once the Muslims took it over, that was it. You might have missed that. You might have slept through that. That's where you going. No, you're going to stay your punk ass right there in Israel. That's just hypothetically speaking. But since that's not the case, you could just sit at home on your smartphone and post on Instagram about how Zionists are bad, about how Israel is doing something that you can't even explain. You just know it's bad. Or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur James Balfour. Now, we rounding out the final bin, y'all. Let me hurry up and get this over with. Right. I was getting ready to say, I was going to go off into another tangent. I was getting ready to say something. And again, like I said, I get it because a lot of the America Firsters, and again, we'll get to that in the next lecture because I'm going to talk about the geopolitics of World War II and then the Cold War, talk about more about Germany, the Nazis, and then we can talk about the Soviet Union. Hopefully, I want to get into that by the next discussion. But again, I get this attitude about America's involvement in this, that, and the third. Again, I talked about some of that stuff in part 1. But again, if you think that the Middle East is important, then by default, Israel is important. Because it's funny because, again, it's not to say that you shouldn't think about it with a sense of prudence and strategy and utility. Right? It can't just be do such and such at all costs, even with regard to Israel. That's the perception that a lot of you have, but it's not true because there have always been debates and pushbacks within Britain and within the United States with regard to what to actually do about Israel. Israel came into existence by and large on the strength of its own volition, not the United States and not Great Britain. In many respects, both Great Britain and the United States did much in the way of sabotaging the creation of Israel from the 1920s onward. And we're going to get into the role that Great Britain played in the potential sabotage of the creation of Israel because the majority of British politicians did not support it. But you would know that because all they do is tell you that the Jews own our political class. They can't tell you why or who, but they just know it's true. Now, who is T.E. Lawrence? Who is T.E. Lawrence? Lawrence was born in Wales on August 16th, 1888, and died in Dorset, England on May 19th, 1935. He was a British archaeologist and military expert who was best known for his war campaigns in the Middle East during the First World War and his subsequent memoir on those activities titled The Seven Pillars of Wisdom, which was published in 1926. It was on those autobiographical accounts that the 1962 movie Lawrence of Arabia, starring Peter O'Toole, was based. The film won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director, and it is largely fictional. The Arabs did very little to aid in the defeat of the Turks, but the Arab belief in this myth did much for Arab Muslim propaganda against the Zionist project after the war. However, one thing Lawrence did reveal, because again, he lied about himself. He propped himself up to be this thing that he was not. This is T.E. Lawrence. Not just the book, not just the movie was fictional, but he lied in his own autobiography. The 7 Pillars of Wisdom has been discredited by damn near every scholar worth their weight. Now, however, one thing Lawrence did reveal was the cause of Arab solidarity. Lawrence stated, the phrase Arab movement was invented in Cairo. Uh-oh. You know, a lot of these early, even like Anwar Sadat, right? The infamous Anwar Sadat. He was not a Palestinian. He was an Egyptian. As a common denominator, let me start the phrase over. The phrase Arab movement was invented in Cairo as a common denominator for all the vague discontents against Turkey. Because there had been a debate, a shift was happening where the caliph belonged to the Arab and not to the Turk. And so here was what you began to see in the 1910s and 1920s. you began to see this idea of a homogenous Arab identity, when prior to, Arabs were a bunch of warring clans that didn't get along with each other. But Zionism gave them a common enemy and a common cause: to hate the Jew. So in essence, they became one. They sure as hell didn't have any respect for the Turkish caliphate, because the Turks had suppressed and repressed the Arabs as well. The tradition of Islam, of course, as I said numerous times, belongs to the Arab and not to the Turk. So they say. And so this is where you began to see the infantile period and stages of what at the time was called Pan-Arabism. Today we call it Islamism or global jihad. At the time it was called Pan-Arabism. Now, 2 years after the war's conclusion, what was left of the Ottoman Empire handed the territories of Palestine and Transjordan over to the United Nations, who then granted administrative duties of those territories over to Great Britain. This act became known as the League of Nations Mandate for Palestine, which again drastically reduced the size of the original partition. Again, I'm not going to get into and read off the mandate. You can go and read it, and you can see how the United Nations and Great Britain were double dealing, pretending to show favor to the Jews whilst backstabbing them at the same time. But again, Palestinian Arab land was not stolen. Even if you want to say it was stolen, to the winner goes the spoils. You lost. I'm sorry, the Sultanate, the Ottoman Empire, you lost. I don't give a damn what I'm saying it figuratively. God forgive me, I don't mean, but you could turn the Holy Land into a Chuck E. Cheese. I don't care what you lost. I don't care if you take every Jew and sit them right there. If that's what I want to do, if I'm Great Britain, I do what I want to do with your land, because you're done. I beat you, you're defeated, you're no more, you lost. And nobody steal nothing from nobody. Now, let's talk about a person. Y'all heard this person. Who was Muhammad Amin al-Husseini? Muhammad Amin al-Husseini. He was born in Jerusalem circa 1895 or 1897. We don't know. But al-Husseini was part of an Arab clan in Jerusalem who led an insurrection against the Jewish presence in the Holy Land beginning in 1919. Instigated by British authorities, primarily Great Britain's financial advisor to the military administration in Palestine, Colonel Bertie Harry Waters Taylor, remember that name, Bertie Harry Waters Taylor, encouraged al-Husseini and his followers to riot on Passover in 1920. So al-Husseini was encouraged by the British to attack Jews on Easter in 1920. These events became known as the Neba Musa riots of 1920. To ensure optimal carnage on that day, Britain removed its troops and the Jewish police force in Jerusalem. As a result, the mayhem caused the death of 6 Jews and over 200 Jews were injured, the majority of which consisted of old men, women, and children. Husseini was soon thereafter arrested, but later escaped. I wonder how that happened. Unfazed, the British government tried and convicted him in absentia to 10 years in prison, whilst, of course, he was a fugitive. However, on April 11th, 1921, the British High Commissioner, Herbert Samuel, met with Husseini and awarded him the title of Grand Mufti, which means ruler, particularly over legal and religious affairs. So he became like the grand ruler of Jerusalem, in hopes of pacifying him. Shortly thereafter, he orchestrated a riot in Jaffa where 43 Jews were murdered, and similar events would occur, with some instances of Jewish casualties numbering in the hundreds, leading up to the previously mentioned revolt of 1937. The British government appointed something known as the Shaw Commission, also known as the Commission on the Palestine Disturbances of August 1929. The commission found that, quote, there can be, in our view, No doubt that the racial animosity on the part of the Arabs, consequent upon the disappointment of their political and national aspirations and fear for their economic future, was the fundamental cause of the outbreak. But wait a minute. I thought the influx of Jewish immigrants to the region actually increased their prosperity. Now you're telling me that they're disappointed in their national aspirations, right? So the Arabs in Palestine, right? They the niggas of Palestine. Niggas are niggas in America, and Arabs are the niggas of Palestine, complaining. Got all the opportunity in the world around them, but they want to complain. This is how I know it's true, because I know man. I know Diddy. I know human nature. I know that's what they was doing. And you got the British elites, the left-wing British elites, remember, because Victoria Clark told us that Zionism, going back to the 19th century, was the burgeoning in the beginning of the religious right in America. Farwell and Robinson and so on and so forth. And so you had British leftists that were on the side of the Arabs, going behind the backs of those that were trying to protect the rights of not just Jews in the region, but Arabs in the region as well. But the British intelligentsia, the British leadership, and the Arab leadership was propagandizing Arabs into hatred. But I'm going to show you how that wasn't that easy. Or why it was easier than it otherwise would have been. I'm going to tell you why. The reports of the military court and still reading from the Shaw Commission. The reports of the military court and of the local commission, which in 1920 and 1921 respectively inquired into the disturbance for those years, drew attention to the change in the attitude of the Arab population toward the Jews in Palestine. This was born out of the evidence tendered during our inquiry when representatives of both parties told us that before the war, the Jews and the Arabs lived side by side, if not in amity, at least with tolerance, a quality which today is almost unknown in Palestine. This was 1929, but Arab immigration began. First of all, again, as you've been watching, Arabs hadn't left the region fully since the days of Simon Bar Kokhba, but even at the end of the 1800s, right? That's when Jews really began to flock in, because they were fleeing not from, say, somewhere like Germany or France. They were fleeing Russia, because you had a strain of pogroms that had begun in Russia in the late 1800s, which was the cause of the first Aliyah. So they were living peacefully up until now. But what happened? It also states, the Jewish enterprise and Jewish immigration, when not in excess of the absorptive capacity of the country, have conferred material benefits upon Palestine in which the Arab people share. Notice something when I'm talking, because at the time, the word Palestine was a word used to designate both Arab and Jew, because the Jews considered themselves to be Palestinians. I don't know if y'all knew that. It was the Arabs of Palestine that sort of rebuked or rebuffed the term, because they saw themselves not as Palestinians, they saw themselves as part of the greater Jordan or the greater Syria. They didn't see themselves as Palestinians. The creation of Palestinians was a weapon of Cold War propaganda and Cold War imperialism. But we're not going to get to that in this discussion. We're going to get to that later. That's when your boy Anwar Sadat comes back into the picture. He was a communist-trained operative, same as Mahmoud Abbas. But again, we'll get to that in the next discussion. So they're sharing in the wealth. But the issue was that Jewish immigration had, quote, been such as to arouse among the Arabs the apprehension that they will in time be deprived of their livelihood and pass under the political domination of the Jews. So they pushing victimhood on the Arabs. The solution the British government determined was to confer more political and economic concessions to the Arabs and to restrict Jewish immigration to the region, which in turn encouraged more terror. Oh, this is how we get it done. This is how we get our way. The findings of the Shaw Commission were affirmed a year later in another white paper titled The Hope-Simpson Report, which was prepared by British civil servant John Hope Simpson. Almost done. In 1936, British Major General Charles Wingate a devout Christian and Zionist, arrived in Palestine and quickly mounted a defense against Arab aggression by establishing British-Jewish counterinsurgency coalition units called Special Night Squads, or declared, quote, "There is only one way to deal with the situation, to persuade the gangs that in their predatory raids, there is every chance of them running into a government gang which is determined to destroy them." So Ord Wingate, he died in World War II in 1944 fighting. And he's still largely regarded as a hero to the Israeli people. They still celebrate the life of Ord Wingate. And Ord Wingate came in and said, enough of bargaining with them. If they want to act stupid, we going to get stupid. They want to come with that. Again, this whole defund the police. It's like, stop giving them what they want. It's just making them act more of what they are, what we don't want them to be. You're reinforcing this behavior. You want the Arabs to stop. You put foot to ass. So what happened to Ord Wingate? I told you he died in World War II, but I'm not talking about that. That wasn't until 1944. After 3 years of Wingate's successful campaign, the British government removed him from Palestine and barred him from ever re-entering the country. But wait a minute, I thought y'all told me that everything Zionist, Jewish, and Israeli, all the Western powers just kiss their feet and kiss their ass. That's what y'all told me. But again, the majority of the British government were not in favor of the establishment. They didn't want the hassle. They didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want that headache. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said the same thing. He said, man, I don't want that headache. I'm not dealing with that problem. Because you have people breathing up FDR's ass. What we going to do about the situation? He said, I don't want nothing to do. As a matter of fact, keep them Jews out of the United States. Don't let them come here. Because I don't want a bunch of crazy mofos yelling Allahu Akbar chasing me down. That was FDR's contention. That was his attitude. You don't believe me, look it up. Look up everything I'm saying, because I don't know what I'm talking about. Go listen to Candace Owens. You don't believe me. Now, the Frankists. Now, Wingate was removed and barred from ever entering the country. In response, Wingate stated, in response to his removal, because again, the British government betrayed Wingate and threw him out because he was successful. In response, Wingate said, quote, "I am not ashamed to say that I am a real and devoted admirer of the Jews." I don't know. Maybe they had something on him. I don't know. Maybe the Jews had something on him. He lying. He says, had more officers shared my views, the rebellion would have come to a speedy conclusion some years ago. You don't capitulate, because these people do not take your kindness as a gesture to be reciprocated. They take it as a weakness to be exploited. Taking one's kindness as a gesture to be reciprocated, God damn it, that's a Christian value. That's a Jewish value. Apparently, that's not a Muslim one. Insofar as Muslims don't take to the liberal tradition that gained its legitimacy thanks to Christianity, because without Christianity, there could be no secular government. And again, that's maybe a different discussion. Now, I'm hearing a little feedback in my headphones, producer. I don't know if you hear it, but I'm gonna keep going anyway because I could talk over it. So, about to round it out. The same year, 1939, World War II would begin, and Hitler would launch his final solution to the Jewish problem. Simultaneously, at the demand of the Grand Mufti, al-Husseini, Jewish immigration to Palestine was restricted to just 75,000 over the next 5 years. So pretty much al-Husseini got what he wanted. Well, at least not completely. But again, Jews were barred by Britain from coming to the same degree to which they had been coming. Now, back in 1899, let's take a trip back. The mayor of Jerusalem, he became the mayor of Jerusalem that same year. Yusuf al-Khalidi wrote a letter to Zodak Khan. He was a French rabbi who was not in favor of Zionism, because there were some Jews, as a matter of fact, who were not on board with Zionism. They thought it'd be better for Jews to remain where they are. and just learn how to become good English Jews or good Italian Jews or good German Jews and good Polish Jews. Just stay where you are. Now, you can go and read that letter from Yusuf al-Khalidi to Zodak Khan. It's on. You can find it if you research it. It's very interesting. He admits in the letter that the land of Palestine does belong to the Jew. He admits that, but he says that there is no realistic way that the Jews can reclaim it, so to speak, without a war, without arms. And so he said it'd be best if they just give up the idea. And if they do want to establish a Jewish state, they'd be better suited doing it elsewhere. This is what Khalidi said. But here's the keeper. This is what killed me. I'm going to write this down to, I'm going to give you guys this sentence of what Yusuf said. He says that, quote, Christian fanatics will not overlook any opportunity to incite the hatred of the Muslims against the Jews. So here he's saying that he's talking to a Jew saying that it's Christian fanatics that are instigating this hatred. They're setting us against each other. That's what he claimed. Christian fanatics, because like I said, as I mentioned, this was a Christian appeal. It was this drive, it was Christian morality, again, that was sort of guiding this kind of manifest destiny inherent within the zeitgeist of the time when it came to the British Empire. And Zionism was just one of those righteous causes as they saw it. These were British Christians that first began to kind of manifest this idea of a restoration of the Holy Land, because they looked upon the Holy Land, saw what it was, and realized that the Turks had destroyed it. Although al-Khalidi's claim is not without some merit, because as I showed you, the British were double dealing. Part of it was they used, to go back to Lawrence of Arabia, they used the Arab population led by Lawrence, right, to kind of galvanize them. But they were just a ragtag bunch of bandits or whatever. They didn't do much. The British defeated the Turkish Empire largely on their own. And so, again, the Arabs felt betrayed when they gave the land over to the Jews when they had helped them defeat the Ottoman Empire in the first place. So we helped you, give the land to us, don't give it to them. But again, the British were double dealing, and you're going to see in the next part as well when I talk about how the British government was playing both sides because everybody didn't agree. That's politics, y'all. It happens. Everybody's not Harry Truman. Everybody's not Donald Trump. Some people are like Jimmy Carter. Was Jimmy Carter a friend of Israel? You don't know your history if you say yes. Was even George W. Bush a friend of Hitler? Or was Obama a friend of Israel? Was Obama a friend of Israel? Making Bibi Netanyahu walk through the back door of the White House. He'll let Kanye come through the front, though. Maybe that's because Kanye West is Jesus. That's what he said. I'm just waiting for Candace Owens to drop that video talking about Kanye and his blasphemy. I won't hold my breath, though. Maybe she did drop it. If I apologize ahead of time because I don't watch her content, but I see enough of it. Now, let me close out. So anyway, al-Khalidi's claim was not without some merit. Muslims had no problem hating Jews on their own, though. One need look no further than the Quran itself for evidence of this fact. And it all stems from the belief amongst Muslims, according to the Quran, chapter 3, verse 67, that, quote, Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian. He was a Muslim, wholly devoted to God. And he certainly was not amongst those who associate others with Allah in his divinity. Now, notice what I just said. Now, let me ask you, Christian, something, right? Says that Abraham was neither Jew nor Christian. Okay, well, fair enough. I guess Abraham wasn't a Jew. The Jews hadn't been invented yet, so to speak. But was he Muslim? Do you understand what they're getting at? Because, see, the whole idea is that the Prophet Muhammad, the excellent one, as they call him, came forward to set right all that Jews and Christians had gotten wrong. But what do Christians and Jews agree upon? What do they get right? Where do they diverge? Where do they differ? Do they both believe in the sanctity of the Tanakh and the Torah? The Septuagint, the Old Testament? That's a holy book that they have in common. What do they think about it? Do Christians believe that Abraham was a Muslim? That's what the Quran says. Was Abraham, Solomon? The Quran claims that all of the Bible's great prophets were, in fact, Muslim. And it is Christians and Jews that are largely hiding this fact from its adherents. And so I'm closing out. And I started to go into, I had a whole thing set up where I go into the Quran. Because, again, we like to cherry pick the Talmud and cherry pick this and take it. Well, look, we're going to go into the Quran, but I'm going to say that for next time because I thought that I was having a tough time preparing this because I'm extremely busy. I was doing this like an hour, 30 minutes a day at a time for about a month. After having worked a 14, 15, 16-hour day, I'll get 3-4 hours of sleep, get up, do it all over again. So that's why it took me so long to put this on paper. But I started to go into, we're going to go into, I said I'm going to stop doing this, but I'm pretty sure this time I'm going to pick up where I left off here because I gave you that one verse from the Quran, but I'm going to give you more. I'm going to go in depth in the Quran, outside my wheelhouse, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I'm going to tell you what the Quran says about Jews. I'm going to tell you what the Quran says about Christians too, because y'all think shit's sweet. And I'm going to show you, right? And then maybe we can, again, get off into, liberalism and why Muslims hate it. Why the Muslim hates the West, why Muslims hate our ways, right? At least Islamic authority. I was on my homeboy O-Dog's live not too long ago, about a couple of months ago, and I made his comment about Jews Muslims hating Jews and wanting to kill Jews, and he called me ignorant. He said I didn't know what I was talking about. Fair enough. We're gonna see. We're gonna go right to their holy text. We're gonna pull right from it, and I'm gonna show you how Muslims what their clerics and their religious authorities inform them to do when it comes to the unbeliever. I'm gonna show you, right? And this kind of totalitarianism that is this like the core of the sort of culture of the Middle East and Africa and so on and so forth. And we'll get to that, right? And why these sort of reforms are kind of inherent within the Judeo-Christian ethic and not the Islamic one. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get into the Quran. On next time, I'm glad that y'all sat through all of this. Again, it probably make some of y'all mad again because, you just don't know. You just don't understand, right? If the Middle East is important, then so is Israel. And remember, for all of this talk about how we were bad, we shouldn't have dropped the atomic bomb and all this stuff, you got all these right-wingers, so-called, are now castigating the United States because we're just like everybody else. This is coming from so-called conservatives nowadays. But yeah, we dropped nukes on Japan. Guess what? Japan is now today one of our greatest allies in Asia. We ain't heard nothing from them since. We defeated Germany in World War II, one of our greatest allies. They had no problems with them since. We defeated the Ottoman Empire in World War I. Turkey is one of our greatest and most influential allies in the Middle East today. It's funny how that works. But if you are willing to give up, if the Middle East is important from the standpoint of national security and just the whole slew, when you're talking about geopolitics, if that particular region of the world is important, then Israel is the most important thing in the region. Because for all of the talk I hear you all spew out of your mouth, how many of you are willing to deal with the consequences of what could potentially happen, right? If one of our enemies were to fill the void. You talk all this crap, but are you willing to deal with the consequences? This is not Palestine versus Israel. This is deeper. This is about the Anglo-American alliance versus the Iranian alliance, the Chinese Communist Party alliance versus the Anglo-American alliance. That theory is just the centerpiece. It's a small part of it. Y'all motherfuckers better get ready because I don't think you even know what's going on. We fighting wars on all kind of fronts. And I swear to God, man, leave it up to some of you conservatives. We're going to be dead in listen. But you can't tell y'all nothing because at least y'all ain't liberals. Right? At least y'all standing up against the LGBTQ and everything else. And so that makes you better than somebody. Sitting there posting memes and reels, kissing Bill Maher's ass, kissing Umar Johnson's ass, Stephen A. Smith, all these clowns on the left. You love them because they calling out Kamala Harris. Do you realize what's going on? Really? This is all about owning Democrats. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. I'm going off into a tangent or whatever. I will see y'all next time. Again, peace out and all that good stuff. Enjoy your weekend. Don't know when this video was going to drop. It probably drop during the week. When you're hearing this, it won't be the weekend. Whatever. But anyway, it's been real. I will catch y'all next time. We're going to pick up on the Quran. We're going to get off into the Hitler, Nazis, the partnership that they had with the Mufti. We're going to try to get into the Soviet Union, the whole 9 yards. And we're going to try to end it up with the war on terror, George Bush, the Holy Alliance between radical Islam and the left. We're going to talk about it all. And we're going to have a lot of fun. So hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. And peace out. Until next time. Peace from Chuck signing out, man. One.